Recording. Hi everyone. My name's Sam Tyrer. I'm the Prevention and Engagement Lead for the Trust. Today we are joined by Damian Hall, who is a ultra runner. So Damian started running when he was 35, if I'm correct there, Damian. Within 5 years, he started competing for Great Britain. He's recorded competitive results in some of the world's toughest races, and as Damian would say, fueled by mostly tea. So he's held records on the Pennine Way, the Wainwrights Coast to Coast, which I had the pleasure of supporting him for the first 26 miles and lost 3 toenails following that, and the Cape Wrath Trail. And he's also finished fifth at the UTMB, which is something called the Ultra Mont-Blac. So to start with, Damien, if you could just tell us about your background, why and when did you start running?
Yeah, it was 11. I think 11 years ago. I mean, I've always been, reasonably sporty. I used to enjoy football and especially sort of long distance hiking. But I was just feeling a bit unfit, and I was living in Bath, where they have the Bath Half Marathon, which is quite up around the city and so on. And I just kind of thought, oh, I'll sign up for that. That'll get me fit. And I was just really blown away by it. I was really surprised how much I loved it. It wasn't just the event. I think it was the training as well, and that sort of sense of mission, that sense of maybe structure to your week, and having this goal that you weren't sure if you could do it. That was a really, it was a great thing. I liked that. So as soon as I did it, I wanted to do another one. And then I was curious about, could I go further? So I was doing my first marathon, and I did that one dressed as a toilet. People shouting, "You look a bit flushed, mate," was funny for the first 10 miles or so, but it was pretty much the only joke that was hurled my way. Although I can think of several more puns, maybe less family friendly, but that was, and then I really did need the toilet towards the end. But again, that was this incredible, when you finish, this incredible sense of, I don't know, a combination of, you're obviously quite physically uncomfortable, but like this sense of wonder almost of, wow, I can do this if I really put myself to it. And I just, this curiosity of sort of how far can you go just carried on. And I ended up doing my first sort of ultra marathon later that year. This is 10 years ago this year. And again, just loved it. I mean, obviously it was uncomfortable during the time, and I can remember now actually getting the train back home and sitting there sort of massaging my sore legs. And I remember the guy sitting next to me sort of saying, "Excuse me, I hope you don't mind me saying, but you seem a bit agitated." And actually, in my head, I was in this wonderful, blissful, happy place, but obviously my legs were quite sore. I wasn't really physically ready for it. But straight away, probably more than the marathon, I thought, this is for me. I want to do more of this. And I think it was at least three things. It was kind of the scenery was better in ultra marathons. Normally they're off-road in the hills. And scientists talk about the biophilia effect, our innate desire to be in nature. And then also the camaraderie was better because you're kind of running at a slower pace and you're just chatting to people out in the countryside, really. And then also the aid stations were amazing. It was like a sort of children's birthday party spread without the children there, so you could just, and a fewer balloons, but you could just, shovel this cake and sweets and crisps down your gullet. And that was seen as sort of, pretty acceptable thing for an adult to do, which I was quite into. I liked that. And I suppose I just got carried away. I sometimes joke it was part of a midlife crisis, and maybe it was, but it never really developed into a full-blown crisis. But there was maybe something about my age of wanting to see what I had left, kind of physically. But I just got carried away after that ultra marathon. Sorry, you're just curious about how much further can you go. And then I suppose over time I began to get more competitive at this. Something about it suited me, and it just took me to all these new places. And then you sort of start going to races abroad, maybe, and I mean, as you're finding yourself, Sam, it's just this exciting world of all these different adventures you can have, I suppose.
I'll turn my camera back on so you can see your face. If it ends up breaking up a little bit, I'll switch it back off. Because my next question was going to be, what did make you turn towards the longer distances? Obviously, you did the half marathon and the marathon, and then what was kind of that appeal? What sort of drew you into it all?
Yeah, because it's interesting because I definitely see with some friends locally who are runners, you know, they find their distance maybe, whether it's a half marathon or a marathon, and they're very focused on trying to get faster at that distance. And yeah, I had some curiosity there early on. You know, I've done a few half marathons now, or marathons, and of course you want to improve your time. But I was just more interested personally in, okay, I've run 100 kilometers in one go. Could I run 100 miles? Once you discover there are these races, and they never stop, all the way up to the longest race, the longest ultra marathon is 3,100 miles. And the craziness with that one isn't the distance; it's that it goes around the same block in New York
Transcendence
for weeks. Yes, the self transcendence, absolutely bonkers. But so you can kind of go, and then you realize people run around the world, or run across Europe. So you can do your own little project. So for me, the curiosity of how far can you go for a few years was really high. I suppose the furthest I went was which is sort of Devon and Cornwall to Minehead, Somerset, and that was sort of 11 days of running. Yeah, you stop and sleep, but not for long, because I was chasing the record. But yeah, that was 630 miles. So I guess when I did that, I just thought, well, in a way, you can carry on as long as the mind is willing, as long as you rest occasionally and keep, shoving the food in, and don't get too badly injured. You can carry on indefinitely. So I don't know. I was just fascinated by that, I think.
And there is a YouTube video on that run as well, isn't there? Was it? I think was you with Innovate then as well?
Yeah, I just started with them. That my equipment sort of sponsors. Yeah, and some friends are filmmakers, and they came and made a short film of that. I think it's called Salt and Dirt. I think. Yeah, that's freely available somewhere or other. Yeah, I mean, most of these films are just me gurning, really, just pulling horrible faces, trying to pretend. Yeah.
So you've got Damian. You've got to an incredibly high standard at a very fast pace. So you've mentioned that you did a lot of hiking. Sort of prior to that, in terms of your younger age group, what sports was you involved in? Because obviously, from an outsider's perspective, it feels like that you've been achieving within sport sort of all your life to be able to get to that level quite quickly.
No, I was pretty. No, I wasn't rubbish at sport, but I was pretty average. Like, for example, at school, I always wanted to play football, but I started playing a bit later than most kids, and so I was basically a sub for the school team most of the time. Like that, and that's not rubbish. Anyone who's if my kids are sub for the school team, I think they're doing great. But I was desperate to be a footballer, and yeah, that was about my level, sub for the school team. And but I was okay at cross country. Like, it just wasn't. I went to school in Stroud, and it was all about football or rugby. But when we did put cross country on, like, I'd be top 10, and then at sort of sixth form level, I was winning cross country races. But they were quite uncompetitive. They were like sort of 3 schools running together. But I just wasn't very interested because I was a teenager, so there were more interesting things around. And I don't know. I didn't know of any clubs, or I didn't know how to progress that, and I don't even know if I wanted to. But I have always been quite active, so it's not like, I mean, you do get some incredible stories in ultra running of people who've pretty much sort of jumped off the sofa, had a moment, maybe a health crisis moment, where they go, I'm not healthy if I don't change my lifestyle, and off they go and do these incredible things. So in a way, there are many people with better stories than mine who have really transformed their life. I was always quite active. I've always liked the outdoors, certainly. Just never really, but more in ultra running than almost anything else in my life. I found like, oh, something about this suits me. Don't know. I just love it, I suppose.
I suppose your long distance walking will help as well, because I think quite often when I talk about some of the distances that I've run, I think people presume that you run all of it, but actually there is a lot of walking involved. And I think from an outsider's perspective that isn't involved with the sport, they often don't realise that. So do you think that your hiking has really helped you get to the level that you are now?
Yes, and I think in several ways. Yeah, I mean, well, it's not a sneaky secret, but yeah, when we say we run 100 miles, we may well have hiked, or I prefer the word, power hiking, because it sounds a bit more athletic.
It does.
Yeah, it's not like we're sort of sitting down and cracking up a thermos flask and reading the paper for a bit. If you want to do well, you're power hiking, you're going quite fast, and only really on I suppose the steeper uphills that it would just make no sense to run really. So that becomes a skill in itself. But also, I suppose I was used to being out all day. I'd walk like the Pennine Way, and I'd walk sort of coast to coast. Both sort of trails I've returned to run, and internationally as well. I've done hiked things like the Inca Trail and the Everest Base Camp, and so I loved being out all day. Being a bit self-sufficient, carrying your stuff, a bit of navigating, coping with the weather. I did already love all that, and I think that has been useful. But as I say again, lots of people come to the sport without any of that background and do absolutely fine.
And can I ask, Damon, if you don't mind me asking, what in terms of your parents, have they been involved with sport in their lives? Because I know from my perspective, my dad is a very, very good athlete, as is my granddad and my uncles, and I can kind of see where I've sort of picked up some of my abilities from. Is that the same for yourself, or?
No, not at all. No, they're not interested in sport, kind of whatsoever, really. My dad, but I do remember my dad would go jogging, maybe once a week, but purely for sort of health, keeping himself in. Yeah, he never signed up for any races or did any of that that I remember. And definitely, growing up, we didn't even have a television, so I don't even remember sort of watching any sport or anything. But we were outdoorsy, you see. So nearly all our holidays were camping holidays, and hill walking, really. So that's what appealed. That's why I think the ultra marathon stuff, which tends to be, in and around hills and national parks, appeals to me a lot more than the road running. The sort of classic London Marathon stuff. Well, I have done some of that stuff, but I don't find it quite as rewarding, because I think it's that I love being in nature. I think fundamentally that's more important than the sort of that athletic side for me.
Yeah, and I must admit that I find the ultra running community in particular is very welcoming. It's not. It doesn't feel like it's elitist. At the start line, you've got the best mixing in with the people that will be right at the back, which I think is absolutely fantastic. It's personally, I love the sport.
Oh, I did. I like that you found that. And one thing we constantly see actually is that especially with the gender differences, the longer the distance some of these races go, the more of an equalizer it can be. And often on the start line, I'm going to stereotype here a little bit, so I'll put that warning there. But sometimes you'll see, a young muscular guy and maybe an older, smaller woman, and actually a lot of the time, the older, smaller woman is going to have a more successful time and knows what they're doing more and is just smarter with all of it. And there were various studies about the gender differences, and I could go on about that for a long time, but it is much more of an equalizer, and it often isn't the strong, fast man who wins. So yeah, I do love that about the sport.
Yeah, I agree. So going back to what I mentioned in the intro, you've been fortunate enough to represent GB. So could you tell us, how did you find that? What was your experiences of it? I know briefly you have talking about this in your book as well, which I can plug that at the end for everyone to hopefully buy.
I did lose a word or two there, but I think you were just saying what was the GB experience like.
Yeah.
Okay. It was mixed. It was mixed actually, because I had I had a terrible race, for various reasons. But yeah, I mean, I had no idea. Ultra running is still quite niche. I mean, as people will probably know, it's it's not at the Olympics. There aren't many sort of international standard championships as such. But there are races that are international where all the best runners might just come to, but that's kind of organic. But there is one or two organizations, and they try and put together a trail running world championships, and it's not every year, and the distances change a bit, but basically in 2016, the GB selectors nominated a race, a 50-mile race, and said this will be the trial, and the UK championships. And I don't know, I was just in great shape at the time, but it was one of the most competitive sort of domestic races there had ever been at the time. But I was just in really good shape. I think partly I'd done a race abroad in Costa Rica earlier in the year, and I think almost that had given me like some heat training benefit. Now I think about it. but yeah, I did surprisingly well in that race. I placed second, which surprised me and most people. And I still had to wait a month or two for them to sort of select the team. But the idea was the first three people get into the team. And then the actual race was in Portugal right at the end of the year. But by then, if I'm honest, don't want to go into the politics of it, but sometimes they sort of, the selectors leave you in limbo a bit about what's happening when. And I ended up doing a big race that I was very keen on, UTMB, sort of 2 months before, and probably that didn't leave me in the best shape for the GB, for the Trail World Championships. And I got really, really bad cramp. I'd never had that before. And yeah, it did. I finished the race, but it wasn't pretty. So that was a bit disappointing. Maybe I could do things differently if I had another chance. But the opportunity. A suitcase arrived with sort of the same GB kit that Mo Farah wears. The same too short blue shorts, and strange vest and stuff. And that was mind blowing. That at the age of 40. I was representing my country, and I'd given that no thought. I'd always thought, can I be an England footballer? Wasted half my life trying to be an England footballer. Didn't get remotely close. And then suddenly I was in this new sport where I was, representing my country with, sort of ceremony with flag, things like that. It was mind blowing, really. So yeah, still very grateful for the opportunity. Even if the day didn't go that well for the whole team, actually didn't go that well.
And have you still got the suitcase?
Yes, it's quite a good reminder, actually. It's sort of on top of my wardrobe, so it's one of the first things I see every morning, and it's kind of a reminder that this sport it's here to humble you. Every time you have a good, a great outcome, a terrible outcome is just around the corner. So yeah, it's a good reminder, actually. And those mornings when maybe I don't necessarily want to get out the door and train, I kind of think that partly that's the prize, or that's something I've got to make up for. So yeah, I still use it for motivational reasons. Yeah,
and rightly so. It just shows that there's absolutely no limit. No matter what age you can get into something. That anything's possible. With the right work and dedication, that you can achieve absolutely anything. And from an outside perspective, I think it's really inspiring.
Well, there's something unique, I think, about endurance sport, which our top end speed isn't as important. Obviously, the faster you go in training, that can drag up the rest of your sort of thresholds, VO2 max, your lactate threshold, aerobic threshold. So running fast in training is helpful, but in the actual races, and it's your sort of speed that starts to decline as you get older. And I'm 46 now. As a footballer, you're pretty much finished at 35, and yet I was getting called up for Britain at 40, and I'm still sort of competitive in races now. So yeah, that's great that there's sports where you can be well over the hill elsewhere, and still do okay in this sport. So it's I think that's exciting for anyone, hopefully.
Because I know from what I've found from the races that I've done so far is actually when you're at the start line, predominantly I'm one of the youngest there. It seems to be an older person's sport.
Yes, it is to an extent, and I wonder if also running. I mean, I did sort of discover running, which sounds an absurd thing to say, but around the same time as I became a parent, and it's such a flexible thing. Before that I was playing football, and of course you need someone else and a ball and a goal and usually a set time to meet people. And as a new parent, often doesn't really fit well. Whereas as you know yourself, if you can get up early while everyone else is still asleep, or or go out when everyone else has gone to sleep in the evening, you can really, it's a really flexible, probably only cycling or walking are similar. And obviously cycling, you need a bit of equipment and a road and lights. And so it's a wonderfully simple sport. It's wonderfully flexible. So it does fit slightly with older people, I'd say.
So moving on now, Damian, to your records, or FKTs, which stands for fastest known times, but there's a bit of controversy around this. So the first one that I'd like to start with is the Pennine Way, which I know currently John Kelly does have. Sorry, Damian. John Kelly is an American ultra runner where I'll let you say a bit about Damian rather than myself, because you know John a lot better than I do, and Mike as well.
Well, yes, thanks for dragging that up, Sam. Yeah, so there was there's a trail called the Pennine Way, which goes up sort of the middle of England from the Peak District right to Scotland, 260 miles. And there had been a record for running it, which had stood for 30 years. And I'd hiked the Pennine Way, and there's something really special about it. It's got a lot of history, and it was a real rite of passage for probably for maybe people 10 or 20 years older than me. It was what a lot of them did when they left school, would go and hike the Pennine Way kind of thing. And yeah, when lockdown came, I'd been thinking about it for a while, but was very intimidated by it. So when lockdown came along in 2020, and I realized that John Kelly, who's an American ultra runner, who's he's one of the best in the world, but he's living in Somerset over the border from me in Wiltshire, we're friends, and he said he was going to go for it, and I said, well, if my races get cancelled, maybe I will as well, and they did, and we ended up going just 8 days apart. I always just thought he would beat me because he's John Kelly, and he's completed some of the toughest races in the world, to a higher standard than me sometimes. So he went 8 days before me, and he broke the record that had stood for 30 years, but only by it was less than half an hour. I think it was 24 minutes, so it was quite close. And I knew I was going a few days later, and he did have some problems during his, and I had a lot smoother ride. But I was able to beat his by 3 hours and a bit. But that was essentially sort of one day. The third day, you're very tired. You're pretty pathetic case by the end. But then this year he went back again and beat my record by 3 hours. So he, as I say about this sport, 1 minute you feel fantastic, and then you can be humbled all over again. But fair play to him.
In terms of sleep, Damian, then how much did you get?
I think I had 40 minutes over sort of 2 nights. So not super healthy. It's really difficult trying to work out, if I try and sleep now, and that takes half an hour, but will my pace be, I don't know, 20% quicker for the next 6 hours, and therefore it is worth it. So it's really hard in your head to sort of give up a bit of time that you've worked hard to accumulate. Now for me, and I did try and sleep twice before that, and I actually lay down to sleep 3 times, and only 1 time I think was successful. So it's really hard judging that, and the longer something goes on, the more the sleep deprivation is key. But power naps can really work. If 10 or 15 minutes, you can really sort of trick your body into thinking it's had a longer sleep. Obviously not super healthy in the longer term, but sometimes they work, in the short term. And the other thing is, I suppose, you've just got to keep getting the calories in. You're in such a deficit nearly the whole time. You've got to eat and eat and eat, and of course after a while your tummy isn't happy about that, your mouth isn't happy about that, you just go off food. You stare at things that you used to love and just think, I've been eating nonstop for 2 days. So that becomes a real challenge, is what can you get in, so it becomes less and less about the running the longer something is. It's the sleep deprivation, the fueling, and your mindset, I suppose, kind of.
Sorry, I lost you.
Simplify kind of is, how much do you want it? Like, how motivated are you? Oh, am I okay now?
Yeah, I got you now. Yeah. So
maybe I was speaking too fast. Go on.
My next question was going to be, how do you prepare for something like that? Because I think a lot of people may think, you're running hundreds of miles a week to train for something like this, and how do you prepare? What's your typical mileage building up to something like that? And in terms of the sleep deprivation, can you actually train for that, or is that something that you just got to accept is going to happen, and you just got to get on with it?
Yeah, no, great questions. The with the sleep deprivation at the moment, there's pretty much no science, as far as I can tell, in terms of sport. There's no real study showing that you sort of can train for it. I believe I heard of a study sort of taking place at the quite soon, and it'd be really interesting to see, because anecdotally it feels like you can train for it, and certainly. I coached someone called Jasmine Paris. She did incredibly well at something called the spine race, and she was sort of a fairly new mother at the time. I forget exactly how old her daughter was, but she was still waking in the night and breastfeeding, and that seemed to actually really benefit her during the spine race, where she had almost no sleep for sort of 2 or 3 nights. I think she had less than 2 hours. But at the moment, there's no science actually saying, as far as I know, like, you know, this is how you can train for sleep deprivation. But it does seem like power naps work. And yeah, I mean, the debate, and as a coach myself, you know, you need good sleep from good quality training to make those adaptations, or your hormones can get out of balance and just fatigue. So it's a really difficult one. I would actually encourage people to, you know, try and sleep all they can, to be honest, and go in hopefully as fresh as possible. But and as to how I train normally, I suppose, yeah, it's not crazy mileage, and I'm not a full-time athlete. There have been some times where I've sort of been able to sort of run 90, 100 miles a week, but not all that much. And most of the time, I'm normally around sort of 65 to 75 miles a week is a good sweet spot for me, I think, at my stage of training and my age. But it doesn't need to be crazy. And the thing with running, as opposed to say triathlon, is in triathlon you've got 3 different sports, and swimming and cycling aren't they're not sort of impacting the joints. So triathlete can train, you know, possibly twice as much as a runner, whereas a runner, it's the same training over and over again, the same impact. So you have to be a bit careful with that, and the injury rates are high. So yeah, a lot of people can do very well on sort of 10 to 15 hours a week of training. Could have you winning races.
So going on to another one of your current records, the Wainwrights Coast to Coast. Could you tell us a little bit about that one as well? And also, if you could mention your experiences towards the end, that'd be great.
Yeah, this is the one. Sam very kindly came out and helped me on that first leg, which was yeah, that was wonderful. The early bits are always the most fun usually, because you know you're not hurting yet and you're not tired yet, and I have very kind people like you carrying all my snacks for me. But yeah, and the weather was just right, if I remember. It was kind of cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed those first few miles. So again, this record had stood. It's a trail from one side of the country to the other. I think it's 185 miles. And the same guy that used to have the Pennine Way record, Mike Hartley, had the record for this for 30 or 31 years. And it was basically sort of a day and a night and a day. And yeah, off we set. It was all going very well. I mean, I had to be fairly ambitious to get ahead of his record, and it was a much faster pace than the Pennine Way record. And yeah, it was all going quite well until sort of night time, and I started to get 1 or 2 tummy issues, which is kind of normalish, if I'm honest. You're trying to shove in all this food. It's probably not surprising. In fact, I've got a very good friend who's a sports dietitian, and she kind of says, we're not, our bodies just aren't used to taking all that food for 24 hours or something. We're trying to get all this food in. But yeah, I took the decision to cut out my electrolytes, and I do seem to be quite a salty sweater. And I carried on drinking, and I did have a bit of a different drinking sort of approach this time. In the past, I've always drunk to thirst, and this time, for a few different reasons, I sort of thought I could hydrate better, and I had this idea of I should have at least this amount of liquid per hour, and then I removed the salts because I had a slight tummy thing. And a few hours later, I started getting, I don't know, quite confused and quite suspicious of the people I was running with, which sounds horribly ungrateful. It was quite like being drunk, if I'm honest. But I was questioning them quite a lot, sort of saying, you sure we're going the right way? And I started falling over a lot as well, really sort of comically and slowly. And honestly, people thought I was falling over on purpose because it was so sort of pathetic. And then by the end, well, the last couple of hours, I really showed no interest at all in the record. Whereas before that, and when I ran the Pennine Way, I would have this schedule in front of me, and I'd be very like, oh, we're 10 minutes slower, or we're 10 minutes ahead, or really on it all the time. And I had no interest. And yeah, I was just getting very confused. And then right at the end, I started sort of leaning sideways and couldn't do anything about it. And there's someone, as I come down the finish line in Robin Hood's Bay, Yorkshire, there's a guy standing there with I've seen the video. He's waiting for me to come around the corner. He's got his phone. He's recording. And then as I come around the corner, he says, "Oh, Jesus Christ. And he was prepared for someone to look a bit rough, but I was looking stranger. Yeah, one of my crew who is actually a GP said that I was running like a question mark. So yeah, it's kind of funny, and it's kind of what we worked out was I had hyponatremia, which is sort of overhydration or an imbalance of salts and liquid, and we can't be quite sure because still over the whole period of it, the amount of liquid I had wasn't crazy, but I did cut out my salts, and we think it maybe it's one of those two factors or both, and it can be fatal actually if I carried on, just drinking and drinking. I might have got really serious trouble. As it was, I just provided some comedy for anyone watching, and I did break the record, but only by 20 minutes. I think it was 18 minutes, and I'd been over 2 hours ahead. And in those last couple of hours, I just slowed right down and seemingly not cared at all. But yeah, so that was quite an adventure, quite a drama.
Would you have any intention of going back to do it again, or?
At the moment, I don't feel I need to. I think if someone broke that record, I'd be quite interested, because I know for me, I was semi-comfortably 2 hours ahead. There's room to be improved on, but at the moment, I don't know if the motivation would be there to beat my own record. Some people could do that, but with this stuff, you have to dig pretty hard, and towards the end, kind of just thinking, what's my motivation? I've already got the record. I don't know if I would really push like I could, if I'm honest.
I can understand that. So what I'll do now is, instead of talking about the Cape Wrath Trail, there is a video of Damian doing the Cape Wrath Trail with a lady called Beth Pascal, who's a paediatrician in the NHS, on Amazon, where you can watch a bit about that. Just to mention, Damian, just your experience of coming fifth in the UTMB, which is the Ultra Mont-Blac, for people that don't know. The Ultra Mont-Blac is, probably the most prestigious ultramarathon in the world. It's where you get the likes of Kilian Jornet, Zach Miller, all these really big names. So for Damian to come fifth is a huge achievement. It basically means Damian's one of the best ultra runners in the world. It's you would be modest, Damian, but to come fifth on a platform like that is absolutely incredible. And I know a lot comes to it in the day in terms of how other people's races go and everything, but to not play it down, that is a huge achievement. So if you could tell us a bit about that, that'd be great.
Thank you. I got quite obsessed. So it's a 105-mile race in the Alps. Starts in Chamonix, France. It's a circuit on the hiking trail, Trail de Mont Blanc, and it's become the sort of de facto World Championships, in that's the most competitive, or at least 100-mile distance race. And I got quite obsessed with it when I first did it. I was sort of 29th. It's over 2,000 people sort of start it. I was 29th and thought, oh well, that's pretty good. But each year I just thought, I've had an amazing time, but I think I could do a bit better. And so I was 29th, and then the next time I was 19th, and then the year after that I was 12th. And I suppose that 12th place, each time I thought I'll just do it one more year. But with the 12th place one, I actually got into 10th place quite near the end. And then I think I just didn't eat enough, and I slowed down, and I let two people pass me in the last couple of hours. But I had so much frustration from that I could have been top 10. And I suppose the top 10 are treated like the top 3 in the Olympics or whatever. It's the podium is 10 people go up on the stage the next day, and so on. So I just had that frustration bubbling all year, and I just went all in. I suppose I did everything I could to try and do better than that. I missed. It was the following year. It was my cousin's wedding on the same weekend and stuff. I just had. This sounds terrible now, but I just had no. There was just no decision in my mind. I was going to do UTMB. We're friends again now, just about. But I sort of almost went part-time work-wise. There wasn't much money coming in, but I kind of went part-time to train to do as well as I could. And some things went well for me in the race because it's the summer in the mountains. It can do anything weather-wise, and it was much more sort of British weather. It was quite cold and a bit of hail and mist and snow, and so that suited me rather than the heat. And then that year there were quite a few DNFs, which stands for sort of did not finish, which is when if people go out hard and for whatever reason decide not to finish the race or just can't finish the race. So quite a few of the stars ahead of me didn't finish the race. I snuck into 5th place, which was I felt like I'd I'd won it, really, because I was a sort of 40. I think I was 42 then. You know, I had kids. I wasn't full time. I didn't live near mountains, whereas most of the people around me, you know, had those advantages. So yeah, that was an amazing moment, really. And yeah, I had the extra pressure of my friends again making a film of it. So if I hadn't done, and I did think of it, like if it hadn't gone very well, they were still going to make a film. So it would have been like, hey, here's this guy belly flopping, you know, having a bad day. So that was quite motivating at times. You think, oh, you better put the effort in because this film is going to look quite embarrassing if you don't do well. But yeah, and realistically, I do think that's probably the best I could ever do. I mean, people often ask sort of like, could you go back and try and win? And I did go. I have been back once, and it didn't go well at all. And I don't realistically, I was still an hour and 40 minutes behind the winner. And you know, my age comes into it and so on. But yeah, that was still a wonderful experience of, I suppose, you know, it was 4 years in the making, really. So it was the classic sort of, I don't know, patience and putting in the hours and so on.
It must help with all these achievements that when you actually come to line up for a big race now, that you can sort of take yourself back to what you've achieved, and that must give you confidence going into other races. So that you know, has that not helped like reduce your nerves going into the races in the future, or?
Yes, I think the big one is, for me, is every single. So an ultra marathon is always going to be like, you know, at least 4 hours, and normally they're, you know, 20 hours. And during that time, you're definitely going to get tired. And I personally, I'm always going to have negative voices. I get negative voices often about 20 or 30 minutes. And usually they're as simple as, you know, you've worn the wrong shoes, your training wasn't very good, what you're doing this, you're too old, all these sorts of things, but it's rare that I'll listen to them for long because I know they happen every time. And I'll go, hold on. Well, even during that UTMB where I placed 5th, yeah, there was an hour or so where I was like, it's all gone wrong. I've overtrained, you know, I've gone too fast, you know. So there's negative voices, and usually it's that classic rule, a good life rule actually, which is low mood, eat food. And normally, yeah, I mean, your brain needs 20% of your energy, apparently your calories. So often it's just fueling your brain a bit, and things don't always seem so bad. But yeah, no, it really helps knowing that. And they're ups and downs, these races.
Yeah.
They're emotional roller coasters.
Which goes into the next question around, you know, what do you tell yourself when the going gets tough? Like, what is your why?
Yeah, I mean, the most, I think they're going to be, those have got to be personal. You know, every person can be motivated by different things. And emotionally, I do think of my kids quite often during the long nights. And they're not very really interested or impressed by any of this, but that's where my emotions go to, and wanting to set a good example to them. So I do think, you know, parents have a slight advantage with ultra running. And after that, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's sort of trying to bring an environmental message to things, or I mean, sometimes early on, it was just like, is this possible for me? You know, can I run 100 kilometers, or at least travel 100 kilometers? I don't know if it's possible. Like, I wonder if I can. And that was quite motivating. Just, I wonder if I can. But just opening your mind, I think early on, just opening your mind up to the possibility was the key thing. It's easy to think I can't do that, but if your mind switches to sort of, I wonder if I can, I wonder if it's possible, then it kind of is, really.
My next question then goes to something that you mentioned briefly there, around the environment and all the work you do around climate change. So could you tell us a bit more about that, and, you know, what sparked your interest in what is a really important issue for us all?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I mean, I think on some of my social media profiles, I say I'm a climate change hypocrite or something. I think in late 2019, yes, when Extinction Rebellion protests were sort of first making the news, I was really, I was really curious. I was really like, you know, what are these people making all this fuss about? And it was quite easy to look into things, you know, and especially that the Guardian website and the BBC website now have brilliant guides, and we can clearly see how urgent things are and how governments aren't doing enough. And I felt really galvanized by that, and the fact I've got 2 young children, and you know, we're going to pass this planet on to them and to their children. And what are they going to think of us, that we had this chance, you know, to correct things, to not mess things up any further, and that doesn't seem to be happening. So I felt really impassioned by that. But then I sort of didn't know what to do, and I think a lot of people are in that situation of, oh yeah, well, yeah, as I described, really. I guess I went to some Extinction Rebellion protests at first and joined in, but then of course naturally I started looking at my own lifestyle, and I was, I was flying around Europe to races, and that wasn't really compatible with my values anymore. So I've consulted with a company called Our Carbon, who are sort of a carbon auditor. I just wanted to try and understand my own footprint, my own family's footprint, and we could sort of calculate that. And it was just fascinating to look at, where are the emissions, where can you improve? And yeah, it was fairly easy for us to improve overall. For anyone who's interested, it's usually three things. It's sort of diet, travel, and energy for your home or business. Some of those are easier than others. But I sort of went vegan, which I find surprisingly easy and fun. And I've cut down a lot on the international travel. I haven't flown for a couple of years, but I can't quite pledge to give that up altogether, but I've massively cut that down. But I do think what I really think is more important than doing that is sort of activism, or at least sort of spreading, several books now from academics are saying that the number one thing to do is to talk about it, which sounds in a way a bit weak. But that hopefully keeps the ideas being shared, keeps it on the agenda, I hope. But ultimately, yeah, I think it's activism and political stuff is going to make more difference. I don't think, there are some low-hanging fruit. So being an obvious one, but really, I think, yeah, trying to be involved with activism is probably, well, definitely going to be more effective overall. And I should say, yeah, I mean, some of the stuff I'm doing, although I'm not flying, yeah, I sometimes drive to the mountains, and I feel bad about that. But I don't drive in an average week. But yeah, you got me started. I could waffle on forever. But yeah.
you are writing a book on this, aren't you? Is that directed more at runners or?
Yeah. So I'd done a publisher approached me and kind of said, well, you're interested in this. What do you think there's a book in it? And the more I looked into it, the more I thought there was. I suppose it's just we're trying not to sort of point fingers or anything, and I'm not perfect, and that's part of the problem. Is no one's perfect, but if we can all make progress. But it was looking into. Yeah, I'm on it at the moment. I'm meant to finish it next week, which looks unlikely. But yeah, a lot of our kit is surprisingly bad. The production of it is in lots of ways, and then there's the waste at the end. But there's lots of things bad with our kit, and then I suppose it's what happens at events and our travel, and again diet. So I'm digging right into that at the moment. I think there's a book out later this year, but it's I'm trying not to get too depressed about it all. It's trying to keep it a book what people actually might want to read, rather than just dooms, dooms. What do you call it? I was going to say doom scrolling, but it's not scrolling, is it?
It's something
doom thinking.
It's something that we all need to know, though, isn't it? So we need to draw it to people's attention. So
yeah.
So what I'll do now, Damian, I could carry on talking to you about this from my own questions all day, but I'm going to move on to the ones that people have sent in. I'm just going to take one from the chat to start with, if that's okay. So it says, Damian, I'm doing my first marathon in Manchester on the 3rd of April. What would you advise me to do the last week before a marathon? I have done two half marathons in the last 2 months and did 10 kilometers from January. Currently doing 60 to 70 kilometers per week. I haven't run more than 31 kilometers in one go. I'm 38, only started running last year, not professional in any nature, aiming to go under 4. Any advice, they would be grateful.
Oh, yeah, well, that's pretty good training. I guess the final week, yeah, you obviously want to be well rested and fresh. I think give up the idea that you'll sleep well the night before, because none of us ever do. So the idea is to target the 2 or 3 nights before that and maybe go to bed an hour early. You do want to be well rested. Try and take care of any admin, a few days before, whether it's, pinning the number to your shirt, getting your race snacks, making sure those special socks are washed. You don't want to be stressing on that the day before or race morning. I would personally, I'd run a little bit the day before, just like 3 kilometers ish, but maybe rest the day before that, just to almost put a blocker on and say, like, I'm well rested, but just keep the legs a little bit alert. Just sort of 3 kilometers the day before in the morning. And And yeah, people get the carb loading wrong sometimes as well. Yes, it's worth having a decent meal the night before, but you don't want to. I've certainly gone to bed not being able to sleep very well because I've shoved in too much. And for actually your body to turn the calories into glycogen stores, it actually takes longer than that. So the key window is actually sort of 36 to 24 hours out. So over 24 hours before the race, that's when you want to sort of be carb loading. And carb loading doesn't mean loads and loads of carbs. It just means maybe instead of like a yogurt for your pudding, have a a bit of cake or a crumpet or some carbohydrates more. So it just means switching your diet to make it a little bit more carbohydrate heavy in the 48 hours before. But otherwise, I think your training sounds good, and I would still run most of those days beforehand, just less, and keep it easy. And yeah, no, that sounds good training.
Perfect, thanks, Damian. So another question for you: as a beginner or returning runner,
Hello. Sorry, Sam. I did miss
it
that
lost
one.
me then. Yeah, so it lost me then for some reason. So my question was, as a beginner or returning runner, what would be your biggest tip for getting into the habit of running into a busy lifestyle?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think you've got to sort of look at your week and optimal time. It's that sort of you've got to try and make it routine. So whether it's a Wednesday evening or a Tuesday morning, pinpoint those key times and then try and make it a habit. So it's at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday and 5 o'clock on a Thursday or whatever. Those are whether that's AM or PM. Those are the key times. So try and make it part of a routine. I'd say that's number one thing. I mean, what Sam does a bit is I suppose get up before everyone else is. And I found over time that my running was more rewarding than most aspects of social life. So I was happy to sort of say no to going to the pub and going to bed at 9 or 10, and happy to get up at 6 to do my run. It doesn't mean everyone has to give up the social lives, but that's what I did. But and I think some people find it really hard to get up at 6, but I think when you've done it a few times and it becomes sort of normal, you automatically start going to bed a bit earlier. And I don't know about you, Sam, but I sometimes really cherish that hour or two before everyone else is awake. It can be magical, especially this time of year, actually. This is a perfect time of year actually to get back into it totally before it gets too hot again. It's it's lovely.
And I think for me, it sets me up for the day, right? It clears my head and just gets me ready for the work day. That everything that I've got going on the day, and I personally find that getting everything ready the night before as well helps. Making sure everything's prepared. I don't know whether you do that, Damian, or not before you.
Oh yeah,
I've
got a tip there actually. Often I often see in magazines when it comes to winter is like how to keep your running during winter, and nearly always the tip is get your kit out the night before. I tend to go one more, and I'll often sleep in my kit. So obviously you want to, not always the socks, but yeah, I if I'm going to be getting up early, sometimes I just sleep in my kit, and then there's no decision to make, or you just roll out of bed and you're already half there. But yeah, put your shoes by the door. Make it as easy as possible, or at least as hard as possible to talk yourself out of it. But I think the rewards are huge. Actually, the getting back, the feeling you can get for it can almost be all day sometimes, or at least all morning, and occasionally it's smugness, but not always. Sometimes it's just a warm, fuzzy feeling that you've had some exercise. The rewards are big, I think, and yeah.
Definitely, from my perspective, actually training in the morning, you're less likely to put it off. If you've not got into that routine, you think, oh, I won't run in the morning. You'll go tonight. You've got more time there to make excuses to not go. So I actually think sometimes getting up and getting it done in the morning is the best thing to do, from my perspective, anyway. I'll go on to another question in the chat, which feeds into what we've just been saying there, really, Damian. How do you stay motivated to get up and train on a day-to-day basis? And what advice would you give someone wanting to juggle training around working kids?
Yeah, I'm probably going to sound quite annoying, but I've never really felt unmotivated running gives me such a reward. And I don't mean necessarily setting records or races and stuff. It's the day-to-day feeling of kind of health and happiness that I get from it. The kind of peacefulness, the runner's high. It's something scientists study. It's not a made-up thing. So to have that feeling every day, I've always wanted it. I've never, I sometimes I've been tired and it's winter and it's harder to get out the door. But I'm I'd almost say addicted to running. I don't run every single day. One rest day is probably a good idea. But it's such a wonderful feeling of running that. Yeah, I want it constantly, I suppose.
So to counter that, Damian, if someone really wasn't motivated to go out and run, is that then the right sport for them?
Well, I would say it tends to get. I've seen this with my wife, who would never call herself a runner, but she has run a marathon and some half marathons, but doesn't seem to love it like I do. I think I kind of think it's worth trying for everyone. But I've definitely got friends, and my uncle as well is always saying, "Oh, I'm not a runner. It doesn't work for me." And yeah, there are other sports. There are lots of other sports. But I don't know. It's such an amazing. What I love, it's just such a simple sport. You just need a pair of shoes, really. It's amazing what it gives to people, and there are so many books now about running. And there was this annoying sort of midlife evangelist of running, and even Kipchoge, the sort of greatest runner in the world at the moment, tweeted a year or so ago. It does sound a bit, what's the word, airy fairy. He kind of said if everyone in the world went running, we wouldn't have any wars. Well, I don't know, probably a bit idealist, probably not quite true, but he believed in that idea that running kind of makes you kind of peaceful and happy and satisfied. It might not be for everyone, and sometimes there are physical things that might stop people. But if not, maybe it's cycling or swimming. But just getting out and moving is it's really surprising. And there are various studies, aren't there? There was the one in the school children who were sort of running or walking a mile before school, and then were just so much more productive for the rest of the day. And various studies. I mean, even the sort of romantic poets back in a couple of hundred years ago, they weren't runners as such, but they were big hikers, Coleridge and Wordsworth, and they would go out hiking around the Lake District and around Somerset, and they would come up with their best material. I don't know if it was both on the hike and when they got back. So there's definitely a whole psychological stimulus going on, and lots of reasons to try it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll just go with two more questions. We've got one more in the chat and then one that someone sent in. Do you eat before an early morning run, or do you just roll out of bed and head straight out the door?
Oh, that's a good one. I think largely it is better to have a little snack, but it might just be half a banana or something just to get things going. I think the current advice on that is maybe twice a week it's okay if it's just an easy run less than an hour, and just like twice a week it's okay not to run. Not to eat before a run. It's not a good habit to get into in terms of like when you're doing faster runs or long distance runs. Like, it's much better to have the fuel going in for various reasons. I mean, high immunity, your immune system is going to be better, for example, which is obviously pretty topical. Stronger bone health and so on, and you run faster if you're well fueled. Although most of your running should be easy, but on the days where you want to run to improve to go a bit faster, do some intervals, you need to be fueled for that, or you won't go very fast. So I would say generally try and be fueled once or twice a week. It's probably not a drama.
So next question, have you ever felt in danger during a race?
Good question. I'm trying to think. So I mean, quite a lot of these races are in mountainous areas. I don't think I seriously have. Sometimes the weather's, there's a race I've done 3 times called the Spine Race, and it does happen in January, so the weather can be pretty grim. And Britain's weather is sort of what's the word? Deceptively severe, actually, in that you can get very wet and start to get cold, and hypothermia. Some experienced fell runners actually. Now that I've talked everyone into go running, I'm going to talk them out of it here. But some experienced fell runners can get in trouble by getting too wet, too cold. You have to be a bit careful there. I don't think I've ever really felt in danger. I mean, sometimes you're in the mountains and maybe it's bad weather and it's nighttime. I think normally you just slow down, you wait for the next runner maybe, and you team up, share their light, share their knowledge, do the route finding together if you need to. I don't think I've properly felt in danger, although I suppose with that time when I got all wobbly when I was running like a question mark, that probably is actually the most dangerous situation I got into, and I wasn't really aware of it. But yeah, largely it's not a dangerous sport.
So the final question before we round it up then is what's the best tip that you've ever been given?
Ooh. I think it's the classic, do most of your running easy. I think there's a temptation to want to go faster and faster, and on someone's runs, especially when you're sort of new to it and there's that enthusiasm. But studies have shown that kind of shortcuts your sort of development. It's almost like putting up like creating a big pyramid. Like if you're going to create a big high pyramid, you need the bottom of it, the foundation, to be as broad as possible. And that is built on easy running and sort of gradual cardiovascular development. If you only build that so far and then start going fast, you're sort of building a bit like this, and it's you're not getting the optimal development you could. And easy, it's a different pace for everyone and different on a different day, but it should be sort of conversational pace. You should be able to talk, and it should be fun. It should be relaxing, and running doesn't need to be fast at all. But I have done an experiment in this, but if you just run easy for even a month or two, you'll definitely get faster too. That's just the way your body works, but it adapts better if we just mostly easy. So there's no rush.
And where, Damian, if people want to find out more about yourself, where can they go to?
Actually, my website's it broke, so it's being rebuilt. But I'm on Instagram. I imagine I'm fairly easy to find there, and I'm probably quite annoying, so I wouldn't recommend following me.
I do really recommend buying Damian's book, In It for the Long Run. It is genuinely, even if you're not particularly into running, it is a very, very inspiring book. So please do go out there and get the book.
Oh, thank you.
Or, I've read it, so I can actually give it to someone if you're interested. So I'm more than happy to do that. So yeah, Damian, massive thank you for coming to talk to everyone at the Trust. Really do appreciate your time today. And I guess really from me personally is a massive thank you from me, because you are actually the reason that I actually got into long distance running. It was not that you actually know this, I've not told you before, but I watched your Cape Wrath Trail video when I was sat with my daughter, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do that. And
Really?
so that because I was doing triathlon beforehand, and obviously I was doing the Ironmans, and I knew that I needed to make a change. I thought I fancy some long distance running after watching that video. I thought, do you know what, I'm gonna give it a go. So thank you very much from me as well. And there's loads of comments coming in on the chat just to say how inspirational it's been. And Louise is actually off to do a 10-mile run in Liverpool on Sunday, actually. But there's loads of thank yous coming in, so we really do appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And thank you for that, Sam. And for those who don't know, Sam is also very, very good at this stuff and won his first 100-mile race not long ago, which was very impressive. So,
that's
we'll all be reading your book soon.
Oh, well, you never know. Give me 5 years or something. If I could get to GB in 5 years, Damian, then maybe. No. Thank you very much, though. Really do appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend. And good luck with your B race this weekend as well.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Take care, Damian. Bye-bye.